Yo, what's going on, everyone? You know, Jim gives me a semi-decent, interesting game to review, and then he drags us back down to the hell of terrible games.
Brian, this game is interesting. Can't say it isn't.
It's not interesting. It would be interesting if this was the only system it came out on.
Ooh, if
but
only.
It's come out on a few. So what are we reviewing today, Jim?
Well, Brian, we are taking a look at the infamous... Rude. Rise of the Robots. But today, we're specifically going to look at the Philips CDI version.
Spoiler ahead, it's not better or worse than the other. They all suck.
Hey.
Let's just look at this piece of shit.
Originally released in 1994, this was developed by Mirage and was published by, well, they had a couple different publishers. Whether it was Time Warner Interactive, Acclaim, or Absolute Entertainment. Why so many publishers? Because it came out on goddamn everything. Hey, Brian, guess what we haven't done in a while?
A good game?
We just did Street Fighter, Brian. Yes, we did a good game. But this was ported to... The Amiga CD32, PC-DOS, to Mega Drive, the Game Gear, the Super NES, the 3DO, the Philips CDI, and for some goddamn reason, the arcade in Europe. What the hell is wrong with you, Europe?
I hate you!
Edit that, bitch. Yes, like we said before, this is a notoriously bad fighting game. Is it as bad as people say? Let's take a look.
The graphics. This is going to be a tough one to defend because this is probably the high point of this game. But if you were a kid back in 94 or 95 and you played this, between the FMVs, which you know Jim and I are suckers for, the actual Donkey Kong style graphic rendering of the sprites themselves, and the nice little touch of when you hit your opponent, little chunks fly off. They might seem minor and it did not age well, but at the time it was impressive. One thing that I will say I enjoy way too much and Jim hates me for is the fact that you can fuck about in the menu and make him kind of twitch all around like he's a DJ or something, dancing to the music. I don't know why, but I love that, Jim.
It's kind of goofy.
And I'll be honest, I kind of like the design of all the robot enemies you fight. It's not overly impressive, but once again, I'm trying to be unbiased and say, at the time, this would have looked pretty damn good. So, I gave it a 7, Jim gave it a 5. When it comes to beers, I'm going to add 1 for the twitchy robot dance.
Alright, the sound. The sound's a weird one with this game, so we're just going to focus on the CDI, because depending on what version of the game you play, your sound experience is going to be totally different. The 16-bit consoles don't have the high-res Brian May music in it. The 3DO doesn't have music during the fights. The CDI that we're looking at here has music during the fights, but it doesn't have sound effects during the fights. It's just all over the map. So, point number 1. No sound effects during the fights. It's a really weird sounding experience when you have the music, but it almost takes all the impact of any of the fights away from you. The music in the game's pretty good to actually excellent. So during the actual fights themselves, it's your normal early 90s techno, cyberpunkish kind of music. It's okay, it's nothing special. The star of the show, though, is goddamn Brian May with the 2 tracks he put on here, especially Resurrection, which is the intro music you get during the opening cutscenes. It's so goddamn good, and it's like 4.5 minutes long. So, you take basically one of the more harder Queen songs, this is pretty much what to expect. So, for that reason alone, we had to give this 6s. And when it comes to beer, you know what? I'll just add 1 beer for no sound effects during fights.
The control. Alright, full disclosure. Before I get to my score, I looked back, I said, why the hell would I have scored it that? Now granted, Jim and I had just done a marathon of other terrible games that he forced me to play that night.
Hey!
And I was drinking quite heavily. So I'm just gonna blame it on that.
But also, full disclosure, we were using an adapter that lets us use a Super Nintendo controller on the CDI. So we weren't using any of the standard, even more terrible controllers that come with the system.
Yeah. But either way, this game is notorious for one of the stiffest controls that you can ever use. Now, the caveat to that is, it's kind of a simple control scheme to begin with. You have punch, you have kick. For some weird goddamn reason, if you press the buttons together, you can block. Don't ask me how to do special moves. We looked it up. They seem like they should be similar to other fighting games at the time. However, we could never pull those off. Jim will touch on this a little more. The only reason why I could give this game any points is you technically can beat the game. I'll say that. And let's just call that foreshadowing. The punches and kicks, as slow as they are, they technically respond when they should. When you do your jump kick, that actually works fairly well. And your duck punch sometimes seem to work well. I don't know. It's really tough for me to have given this game points because I know how goddamn sluggish it is. But since I beat the game, I guess was being more fair. When it comes to scores, I gave it a 5. Jim gave it a 3. Looking back, I probably would have given it a 4 or 3 once again. This is all Jim's fault for making me play such a marathon of terrible games to begin with.
Hey!
So when it comes to beer, I'm going to add 3, because that's probably the score this game really deserves.
Oh, Lord, the gameplay. Alright, so, we all know the 90s were the craze of fighting games. And this one, it tried to have its gimmicks with the robots and the future and all that kind of stuff, but let's just get down to brass tacks. The game's terrible. The control it doesn't work. We tried so hard to be able to pull off any of the special moves, and it just never worked. We couldn't even trip over ourselves to do it. And even weirdly enough, as we're fighting the computer, it didn't even seem like they were doing any special moves outside of maybe 1 or 2 special attacks. So even then, the computer didn't know how to pull off these goddamn moves. The computer couldn't do it. How are we supposed to be able to? And like we said before, we were using a way better controller than the system actually has, and we still couldn't pull it off. The control's way too tight, it's way too sluggish, the control just doesn't work, but thank God. The game is so broken that you can beat it just by continuously moving forward and attacking. That's all you have to do. Don't worry about blocking, don't worry about strategically trying to hit people, just move forward and hit, and you'll end the game in 15 minutes. An annoying thing about the goddamn game is if you lose a fight during the course of the story mode, you go back to the menu screen. There's no continues, there's no starting where you left off like in Street Fighter. If you die on the last boss, back to the beginning, start over again. Why do I know this? Because it happened to me.
What you get for making me play this game, you bastard.
Well, things happen. In single player mode, you can only play as the main cyborg, but if you play in multiplayer, then you can play as all the different robots. So, there's that. But when it comes down to it, we both gave it 3s. Maybe the game's just slightly charming enough that we didn't give it worse scores, but when it comes down to beer, holy crap. Let's just throw another 3 beers onto there. 1 for the god-awful control, 2 for the fact that it's incredibly broken, and 3 for the fact that you have to try and find another terrible controller to plug into the back of the stupid system to have an even shorter cord if you have any hope of trying to play with the second player buddy.
The originality, I'm going to keep very short. This is a copycat in graphics and gameplay, if you want to call it gameplay, and just everything from all the fighters of this generation. The idea of robots fighting each other, that's not new. But you know what is new? And Jim and I have pointed out a few times, Brian goddamn May being on your soundtrack. That was at least original enough, and that warranted us giving this game 2s. There's really nothing here, so when it comes to beer, I'm going to give 1 celebratory beer for good old Brian May.
Yeah! Replayability! Alright. Single player mode, you only get to use 1 character, so you only get 1 ending. And you have multiplayer, so for having multiplayer alone, it's the only reason we had to give it 5s. And when it comes to beer, at this point, I'll just add 1 beer for 1 ending. It's just, God, why? Why did I do?
So, yeah, at the end of the day, the game sucks. If I'm going to play devil's advocate, the graphics are pretty decent. The sound is, actually, I really enjoy the opening theme. I will give it credit there, as I said during the review. But everything else just falls apart. The control is so stiff. I don't even know what to call it. The broken mechanic of just spamming, moving forward, and beating the shit out of opponents.
Thank God this is broken enough that you can actually beat it.
Yeah.
Just by spamming one move.
It's good for us, so we can just show you guys the ending. But once you know that, and you realize if you try to play it any other way, it's basically unplayable.
Oh yeah, don't actually play it, because
No.
you can't.
I mean, hey, if you're someone who out there who can really play this and put together the special moves, and I'm sorry for you.
Then you're probably European. Then I'm really sorry for you.
Stop being racist.
Ow!
But there is no redeeming quality. This is another terrible purchase by Jim. I love one of the selling points on the back of the case, by the way, is including music by Brian May.
Goddamn right.
Like, and hey, we've already given the sound enough compliments, but still, like, you know, if you ever see that on a game where they're really talking about the music, probably stay away.
Brian May needs to come back to do more in-game music. Resurrection is a banger.
Yeah. So, when it comes to scores, overall, we gave it 3s. And to be honest, the only reason it lingers that high on the low scale is Brian May.
Pretty much.
I mean, I think that's a pretty safe assumption. So when we combine all of our scores together, it rounds out to a 3.9, which definitely below average.
One of the lowest we've ever looked at.
This is definitely down there, up there, as the worst we've ever reviewed.
It's down there with the two tightest Superman games and
There's
some
been
other
some
crap.
shit, but this is, I can safely say this is the worst fighting game we've played and reviewed.
Fighting game, yes.
Yeah. So, with that being said, Jim's said it many times.
I'm just going to go back to Strip Fighter 2.
Yes, I would much rather do that. Don't ever spend your money on this. Don't even emulate it. Don't waste your time.
I got it as part of a bundle, so it pretty much came out to $5, and $5 to make a video? Yay!
You make terrible decisions, Jim.
Yes, I do.
Till next time, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers. When it comes to beer pairing, this was a pretty easy choice. With such a terrible game, I had to choose a terrible beer, so I went with Natural Ice. Most people have tried this, especially when you first get into drinking beer. It's dirt cheap, it takes a ton of them to get you drunk, and there's not really a lot of flavor. So if you're brave enough to try this terrible game, go out, get yourself a case, and enjoy. But remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly. As always, guys, thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, or better yet, why not subscribe? Till next time, guys, cheers.